Chris, your timing is impeccable. Morning, all. Just had a comment from Chris Ford, who was actually here before the show started. He's on a bit of a run at the moment. I don't know whether it's because he's now a year older, but he's been early for the last two shows. Chris has just said this. Morning, Big Dippers. Betty Swallock's rules. Betty Swallock's. Yes, it is a bit Betty Swallock's, isn't it? It is toasty warm. Yesterday after the show, I walked down to my local shops, which are about a 4-minute walk, just to pick up a prescription or order a prescription. Went in, did the business, came back again. By the time I got back, I was literally dripping in sweat, absolutely dripping in sweat. It is Mini Excavator World Cup day today, and it is the World Cup final. I will show you this very quickly while we're waiting for a few more people to pitch up and arrive, because the chat seems rather slow today. I think we just had a bit of an influx. Stand by your beds. Yes, today it is. We've been doing this for about a month now, and it all comes down to today. JCB taking on Kubota to be crowned Mini Excavator World Cup Champion 2026. I thought I'd figured it out to coincide with the entirety of the World Cup, but I forgot that the World Cup has the actual Football World Cup has days off. We haven't, so we've kind of caught them up and then overtaken them, I think. So we'll be doing that in just a moment. I've also got a film that I want to show you again when a few more people pitch up and make themselves known. It's a year old. It's a film that I found just browsing yesterday, but it really does sum up the UK construction industry. I can tell you, Ken Hatcher just walked through the door, and once again, poor old Ken is on fire. It is. I was told that today would be a bit cooler. It didn't feel any cooler to me. I'm absolutely sweating golf balls. I've got a fan by my side, which I'm sure you'd be able to hear if I were to turn it on. So I've kept it on silent. But between bits, when I'm off screen and I've got the films playing, I will be sticking my head in that. So let me just reiterate. It all comes down to this, basically. Mini Excavator World Cup. For more than a month, we've actually been trying to figure out our most popular mini excavator brand. Along the way, we've seen giants fall and we've seen minnows emerge, but this is it. This is the decider, and it pits the best of British against the finest of Japan. We've got JCB versus Kubota. At the end of this show, we will be crowning one of them our Mini Excavator World Cup Champion 2026. But for that to happen, obviously, we need your votes. Now, I do have a banner. This is the last time this banner will get an outing for a little while. Which mini excavator brand will be crowned champion? Please choose either JCB or Kubota. It's as simple as that. You just type one of those brands in the chat. JCB. I won't bother you with the spelling of JCB, but Kubota, Kubota, Kubota for Kubota. Take your pick. Decide which one that you fancy to win. Mark Whiting is in the house. Morning, Mark. Chris Phil says, still waiting for those that were coming on to site today to load early. Been here since 7. Hope they bring a shovel if they turn up after 12. Very good. I have a film that I'd like to play you. I'll leave that running because that's going to run throughout the show. But as I say, I was browsing the interwebs last night and I came across a video that I do think sums up the UK construction industry. This was part of a planning meeting or a planning committee meeting in which various parties were consulted about the delays in planning in the UK construction industry. And the guy that's about to speak gives 4 examples of why the UK construction industry is as inefficient as it is. I'm going to play it for you now. Prepare to be astonished and then prepare to be angry. Sit back and kind of enjoy.
It's worth briefly just stepping back and remembering why we do desperately need to streamline the planning system. I'm going to give you 4 quick examples. So, number 1, the Lower Thames Crossing, the planning application for the Lower Thames Crossing, let's see the number here. The planning application for the Lower Thames Crossing has cost more than £250 million. That is more than it cost Norway to actually build the world's longest tunnel. That's been all in planning. That's all paperwork, not a single spade in the ground. Example 2. HS2 is the world's most expensive railway line. And why is that? Well, in no small part, it's because we're doing things like building a £121 million back tunnel to protect 100 Bechstein bats, 300 Bechstein bats that live in a nearby wood. Not actually the wood that the line goes through, but a nearby wood, which I think most people would agree is a disproportionate response. Example 3. We are currently building the world's most expensive nuclear power plant at Hinkley. It is indeed the most expensive nuclear power plant ever constructed in the history of the human race. Why is it so expensive? We used to build them cheaper. 20 years ago, they were half the price. When we built the fleets in the 50s and 60s, they're a quarter of the cost of the ones that we're building now. Why is it costing so much more? Well, in no small part, it's to do with the environmental rules that mean that we are currently, well, EDF are currently wrangling with regulators and have been doing for 8 years about installing an underwater fish disco, an acoustic deterrent to stop the fish from swimming into the exhaust pipes of the power plant. Millions of pounds is currently being spent on this. And example number 4, the planning application for a railway line between Bristol and Portishead, 3.3 miles, reopening an existing line that was cut in the Beeching cuts, is 80,000 pages long, with over 1,000 pages dedicated to bats on what is already existing line.
Setting aside his reference to an underwater fish disco, an 80,000 page planning application for a line to reopen an existing railway line, the most expensive nuclear power station in the world, $250 million spent on planning for the Lower Thames crossing, and the Norwegians built the world's longest tunnel for less than that. We spend more on planning than the Norwegians do on building. Could someone please make that make sense? Ken, I think it's brief, it's pithy, but it's to the point. I think you've just summed it up. Mad. Absolutely mad. And it kind of makes me wonder about the British mentality. I had a conversation long before Brexit with a Belgian taxi driver. I was in Belgium, so he was a Belgian taxi driver, and he picked up on my British accent, and he said, why are you Brits so against joining the euro, accepting the euro? And we treasure our sovereignty and everything else, and we don't want to be told by foreigners how to run our business. And he said, why don't you do what everyone else does? Sign up and then just ignore the rules. That's not the British way, is it? The Norwegians, I'm sure the Norwegians have bats and voles and shrews and rare birds, but they managed to build the world's longest tunnel while we're still in the planning stage. Just astonishing. Chris Ford says, when I can get it to play, one day someone will wake up and smell the coffee and realise we've pissed the money. We've realised that we've pissed the money up the wall. Listen, I think those of us that are here are well aware of the fact that money has been well and truly pissed up the wall. But $250 million. Say if you're looking it up, that's 9 zeros. $250 million on planning. And at some point, somebody will look back and say, "Oh, that Lower Thames crossing, that turned out to be really quite expensive." Well, no shit, Sherlock. If you're spending $250 million on the planning, at that point, all bets are off. How much is it going to be to dig this 4-foot hole in the ground? Oh, that'd be £17 million. Seems reasonable compared to the planning. An absolute bloody nonsense. It's farcical. And bearing in mind, that's a year old, but a number of the projects that we're talking about here, this is not a Labour Party thing. This is not a Conservative Party thing. This is a governmental procurement thing. Every government has been equally guilty, equally stupid, equally short-sighted, and that they've Or, we must, protecting bats that aren't even there. They're in the neighbouring wood. And bats have sonar. Bats can find their way around a tree that's grown up. They can find their way around a building, but apparently a railway might just confuse them. So they need their own dedicated tunnel. I just makes my head spin. Don't forget, we are taking votes on this. Today is the grand final of the Mini Excavator World Cup. So make sure your vote counts. Let us have your choice between JCB or from Kubota. Dan Cullen saying good morning from the bat out of hell. Okay. Meatloaf has just joined us. Right, people, get your votes in because we've got lots to get through, and I'd like to crown somebody the champion today. So without further ado, let me roll the intro and get the proper show on the road. Now that I've wound you all up with the amount that we're spunking up the wall for planning, let's do the show properly, shall we? Bit of this. Mr. Muirhead has just joined us. Good morning, Gary. Good of you to join us. Don't forget to get your vote in. He just did that, funnily enough. It was like he was listening. Jim Turner says, why would a government project need to ask itself if it can build something? Yeah, you'd think, wouldn't you? I'd like to say it's balmy, but it's not. It's orchestrated. All this shite takes management, and management is easy, risk-free money. It's just jobs for the boys, politicians and civil servants, mates. It's nothing new, but it's been in overdrive over the last few decades. Absolutely 100%. I did find it remarkable that if you went back 20 years, a nuclear power station would have cost half as much. And that's adjusted for inflation and everything else. If you went back even further than that, it was a quarter of the price. And we just seem to put the price up and up and up, and nobody seems to bat an eyelid. Dan says on the A417 they spent 300 grand on a 20 by 10 shed for bats. Well, all I can say is I sincerely hope the bats appreciate the effort and the expense. The government may change, but the Sir Humphreys that work for them don't. Yeah. They're the ones that government go to for advice. Yeah, the civil servants. Anybody remember I don't know if it was Yes Minister or maybe Yes Prime Minister, the bit about the newspapers, who reads which newspapers, telegraphs read by people that run the country and stuff like that. Everything seems to be going up, but our wages, yeah, ain't that the truth? And only two come back to it. Let's go back to the bats. They've built a £300,000 shed, and only 2 bats have taken up residence. I wonder how the bats actually respond to this kind of thing. Bear in mind, we are talking about doing bat surveys so that we don't interrupt or interfere with bats and their breeding cycles. So, we're very cautious about building, and we set aside spaces for them. Are those spaces that we set aside for them, be them sheds or tunnels, do they not kind of impact upon the bats? And are the bats roosting in trees, chatting amongst themselves, say, see that shed over there? One of these days we're going to move in there. Is that a thing that happens? I'm not convinced. Listen, I've watched enough Batman movies to know that's not how bats operate. Dan says because ours was stalking the place. Okay, fair enough. Chris Ford says, let's play the game. Let's see how much we can charge before someone says no. After all, it's not their money. It's other people's money. Yeah, absolutely right. And let's be honest. I think that is a commercial reality, isn't it? And I'm equally guilty. Somebody will ask us how much to do this thing, and we'll say, oh, I don't know, 2,000 quid. Okay. And they accept it. So the next time you think, they accepted that a bit too readily. Maybe we'll call it 2.5 next time. Maybe we'll call it 3. And that's how you find your level. But I do think with major infrastructure engineering or civil engineering and construction in this country, it's almost a case of they'll swallow anything, these blokes. You want a new tunnel? Well, we'll start at 10 billion and then we'll negotiate our way around that. And we'll be late. And we'll add on some extras along the way. I remember the two Ronnie sketch. I look up to him and down on him. Oh, absolutely. That was an absolute classic, wasn't it? Bats live in crappy old buildings, so why build them state-of-the-art buildings? Just leave the ramshackle building standing. Indeed, indeed. The votes are still coming in. Don't forget that we are running this today. I just want to make sure that my poll is actually running. It appears to be. But don't forget, keep the votes coming in. If needs be, I will actually go back and have a count up. And the best part is nothing comes down, and fuel is on the way up again. It's almost $90 a barrel now over this Hormuz biz again. Yeah, anybody would think that a big orange fella would, break ceasefires and stuff like that, wouldn't you? It's weird how that happens. Particularly weird given the fact that he's already declared victory 47 times. Weird, right? Andy Thornton says, "Morning, chaps. What have I missed?" Well, you missed me ranting about planning applications and stuff. You can catch that on catch up. Obviously, the dancing girls and the free money were here nice and early, so you've missed them too. But the show is about to begin. So let's. Have I done the intro? It doesn't matter. I'm going to go straight to Cat. We've got a double Caterpillar. We're going to look at their advert first for their drum cutters, and then we're going long reach after this. Yeah, Chris Ford is saying, Andy, you missed the stripper. Yes, and she was particularly enthusiastic this morning. Boss 5 Cat over on Instagram just joined us and said, hi. Well, hi back to you, sir. Thank you. Or madam. Not entirely sure which one you are. Gary Muirhead says, Mr. Badger is better looked after on site than we are. Indeed. And it's not just on site. I think we take care of our wildlife probably better than we take care of our elderly and our homeless. All very true. The case of this country is put in your price and then keep adding and adding to it. Indeed it is. As I've said many a time, this inefficiency drives inflation and debt, the two things the current model needs in order to survive. Come the glorious revolution. Right. The long arm of the cat. Question: has anybody ever operated a long reach, particularly in water? So we talk a lot about high reaches, working very, very high, 20, 30, 50, 60 meters in the air, and you've got cameras to refer to and so on down the line. What about underwater? Do you have cameras? Are you doing it by sense of feel? Are you doing it by guesswork? Love to know. Andy Thornton says, the long arm of the cat then leaves pause for thought. The old dad joke syndrome strikes again. Well done indeed. Have I ever told you, those, are they Chinese or Japanese? The cats that do that with their paw, they freak me the fuck out. I wouldn't say I'm afraid of them. That's how do they keep moving? I find them quite disturbing. Dan Cullen, going back to the rise of costs of construction, a 400 million rises to $1 billion. HS2 is the creative one, and it's not alone. By the sound of it, Hinkley Point is not far behind it. You miss the big pussy cat on the stripper's lap. I miss that. Every day it gets like Big Brother. Yeah, it's talking about the UK. Every day it gets like Big Brother. A little turn of the screw every week. That's what it feels like. Dan saying, wow, that's a wide undercarriage. I'm going to leave that alone. Let's have a look. No, but it looks like great work, says Jim. That's one hell of a kitty. There's a beast. Wonder, do they do their checks? I literally, I don't know. Because, you must, during sort of a dredging process, you must come up against stuff that you probably shouldn't be digging, underground cables and that sort of stuff. Are they doing it by guesswork? Are they equipped with underwater cameras? I'd love to know. If anybody has any answers on that, please let us know. We're building with Liebherr in a moment. Not just anywhere, though. We're building Miami. Back after this.
If you are enjoying this episode, please consider supporting the show. You can leave us a tip at buymeacoffee.com/demolition news.
Yeah, let's head off to the sunshine of Miami to see some cranes in action. Liebherr doing their thing. Another cracker of a film from the fine folks at Liebherr. We're going to go back to all things related to underwater work. Dan Cullen has operated a long reach, but not in water. Andy Thornton says, I have a boat when they're dredging the underwater cables. They're clearly marked on the banks. I've never seen cameras attached. And then all becomes clear. Two comments here. One from Gary Muirhead, who says, yes, I was on a Cat 352 on the last job and used GPS to place the rock armour. GPS, not cameras, which does make sense, particularly at dredging. I would imagine the water gets mighty cloudy once you start dredging. And there's our friend Simon Tomlin. Good morning, Simon. I'm sure GPS is used. Well, Gary Muirhead verifies that GPS has been used. I have a question for Mr. Tomlin. This is just, I'm doing it publicly, but I'm going to do this directly to Simon. Simon, is your mum called Sue? I mean, if she's not, I'm going to look like a complete Burke. But if she is, I know your mum. It's been a while, but I know your mum. I could have the wrong person entirely. Jim Turner says, the Western world are being treated like the boiling frog. Yeah, the boiling frog. Love that as an analogy. The water is heating up around our ears, but most folk just accept it as normal and carry on regardless until they boil. Yeah, absolutely. London building is its worst seen in years. Around last weekend, not seeing a lot of tower cranes around. Lack of tower cranes, there ain't a lot going on. I always heard, yeah, absolutely. I mean, there have been times when you looked over the London skyline, particularly I find myself on the South Bank quite a bit. You stand on sort of Waterloo Bridge or something like that and look over the city, and it's tower cranes as far as the eye can see. Not quite so much at the moment. Dan Cullen enjoying the tune. Gary Muirhead says we have a GPS module to work to, and after we've done, a small boat comes along and does an underwater survey to see how it looks. Well, it's been an education for me as well. And Dan says, is that the Cat 352 in Plymouth? Is it the same one? The frog that was in my throat yesterday has just re-emerged. I do apologise. Jamie Tarver has just joined us over on Instagram as well, along with a bunch of other people. Problem with Instagram is nobody has their real name by and large. Some of them, Keskimanu, well, I don't know. Dan, mate, we had 2 Cat 352s, long reach excavator from WM Plant. WM Plant do specialise in the long reach, don't they? Always fancy going out for a day with WM Plant. WM Plant, if you're watching, hook us up, would you? We're going electric in a minute, but not as we normally would.
Since the finance bill came into effect in April, the construction industry has seen a surge of fuel thefts. The rising cost of living has placed an additional risk of theft by employees and contractors, as well as opportunistic thieves. By using diesel dye and placing warnings of its use, you are sending a clear message that this is your fuel.
I'm starting to get the impression that Andy Thornton is one of those people that saves the jokes from Christmas crackers. Better a frog in the throat than a toad in the hole, he says. Quite. Thank you for that. Yes, right. Electric. We've seen all manner of electric machines, rechargeable and battery and everything else. There is a third option, of course, and that is tethered. Only ideal for fixed locations, but this is a fixed location we're going to be showing you. This is XCMG with their tethered electric solution. Chris Ford has just said this, and he's kind of raised a question in my mind. And you have to kiss a lot of frogs before you find your princess. Now, obviously, the fairy tale is usually you kiss a frog and you get your prince. So first things first, do you have to gender identify your frog before you kiss it? And is there a fairy tale in which the man kisses the frog and gets a princess? See, I've always had this notion that, women in fairy tales, they fancy a bit of male company. There's a frog there, give that a bit of a smooch. There we go, bingo, Prince Charming's just popped up. The guys, not so much. Not so much. Not great. As what if you slew around and catch the cable? Well, obviously the cable was going through the top there, so I think they've kind of got that covered. And I know they've got the reels kind of retract. Who was it? I think it was Liebherr. I've got like a retractable reel, so the closer you get to it, it kind of winds itself back up, and then you can, a bit like your garden hose on a reel. It works a bit like that. I think the right application, and maybe that application is something like a dockyard on a dock crane or something like that, where there is no slewing. You just literally fix location back and forth and back and forth. But that's what they're doing. Like the colors, but not the concept, says Dan. We've got something for you in a minute. In all likelihood, you've never seen the likes of it. I'm not even going to give you a clue. I'll play this and then I'll show you exactly what I'm talking about. So imagine you're building a road perhaps, and you've got a long stretch of rock, hard rock. You've got a couple of options. You could rip it with a big dozer, but dozers are phenomenally expensive. Rippers, they do rip, but they are prone to breaking. It's very, very hard work on them. You can, of course, blast if you really want to piss off the neighbours. There's a third option. Get a load of this. Gary says this: you would have thought it would have had twin top rams for more breakout force. I thought it did. I thought I spotted twin rams, but I may be mistaken on that. Christopher, completely off subject, says, I know a bloke who went to jail for shagging a goat. His mate went to jail for acting the goat. I wonder what breed he identified as. Conversations on this show have a habit of going sideways, don't they? Be great for about 5 minutes, but be boring after that. Yeah, I think I'd be lasting longer than 5 minutes. You imagine being the pilot of that. That would be something else. Now, I know, I can't remember who's got it now, but I remember ECY Hallmark had the UK rights to the eccentric ripper, which got a bit of a vibration about it, and you basically just drop off a standard attachment, maybe with a quick coupler, hook one of those on, and break your way through. But that, I think, is a bit more of a thing. There's some fair videos of TikTok on those rippers. Yeah, I bet there is. Funnily enough, I actually followed I saw it on Instagram and kind of followed the lead so I could get a wide version of the video. But yeah, fantastic piece of kit. that's about it for the show, but I do need to finalise this, as it is the final day today. It is the Mini Excavator World Cup. Dan says, not quick hitch like high reach. No, it didn't appear to be. Having said that, I think that video may have been a couple of years old, so maybe somebody has thought of that since. So yes, Mini Excavator World Cup. Let's find out who has won that, shall we? I'm going to show the poll and pray and hope and pray it's worked, because I'm never entirely sure with these things. If not, I'll have to go back and have a count up. But it was the grand final today, JCB against Kubota. And our winner, I hope it's not a draw because I don't want to have to call this, but our winner is Kubota. Kubota have won. 60% of the vote. Kubota have won. I've got to be honest, at the very outset of the Mini Excavator World Cup, that would have been my prediction. And I'm not just saying that because I used to work for them. I think they've been the market leader for many, many, many years. I expected the final to be Kubota against Takeuchi, if I'm being completely honest. But JCB did well and knocked out some big names along the way. But JCB made the final, but it is Kubota. Kubota that emerges victorious. And I do think there's a degree of justice there. They've had a very, very long history. I mean, they were making mini excavators before JCB even thought about such a thing. And they've been doing it very well ever since. So congratulations to Kubota. Commiserations to JCB. There's a last minute vote there from Chris Ford for Kubota. I mean, it would have just emphasized the win. Who did JCB go to when they with their first mini digger? Who was that? Was that Kubota? Was that Kubota? I can't remember. I mean, I was actually saying to one of the guys at JCB last time I was up there. No, it wasn't the last time. It was when I went to see the JCB Hydromax, because I'd seen the 715 first time around, and I actually went to the launch of the first JCB built mini excavator, and they held the launch at a farm. I think it's part of the kind of Bamford estate. Not entirely sure it's even there anymore. It's probably been built over, but they held it at a farm. And whereas normally with the events these days, you tend to be invited up en masse. You know, when we went to the launch of the 715 and the 420 and the 520, there was 50, 60, maybe 100 press in attendance. When they launched the mini excavator, I went on one day. Somebody else went the day after. Somebody else went the day. So we literally got a 1-to-1. Way back when. That would have been very late 80s, 88, 89, thereabouts, I would imagine. So yeah, there you are. That pretty much wraps up the main part of this morning's show. It also wraps up this week. Going to give you a quick heads up. Wednesday evening, next week, we're going to be doing a midweek special. You know that I went up to see Komatsu up at Lassie and Williams, the Formula One team. Well, the video of that is now ready to be aired. We'll be doing that at 7 o'clock on Wednesday. I will tell you a bit more about it a bit closer to the time, but we've got that coming up. But for now, I'm going to roll the outro in just a second before leaping gazelle-like over into my morning monologue. If you can't stick around for that, please stay safe, look after yourself, your family, your friends, and your colleagues. I hope to see you again very soon. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday twice, ideally. But if you do have the time and the inclination, I'll be back immediately after this. It's a good start. The modern construction or demolition site is a marvel of acoustic engineering. If you stood on a major metropolitan project 2 decades ago, you would have been assaulted by an unrelenting cacophony of industrial noise. The rhythmic, skull-rattling thud of a hydraulic breaker, the throaty roar of a diesel engine, and the metallic clatter of tracks on rubble. It was deafening, brutal, and honest. But step onto a premium site today and you might wonder if you've accidentally wandered into a library. The industry has entered the era of the whisper. Driven by stringent local authority regulations and a sudden corporate desire to be seen as a good neighbour, the sector has waged a highly successful war against decibels. We have noise monitoring rigs permanently fixed to site boundaries, silently beaming real-time data to stakeholders the second a sound wave dares to exceed a pre-agreed threshold. In Demolition, the old-school hydraulic hammer is quietly giving way to primary pulverizers and cutter crushers that chew through reinforced concrete with a fairly quiet hydraulic crunch. In construction, the diesel engine is slowly being replaced by electric machines that purr rather than roar. We've successfully engineered the noise out of the environment. But while the industry is patting itself on the back for its newfound quietness, a much more sinister form of sound dampening has occurred. Because as the machines have grown inexorably quieter, so too has the workforce. There's a striking juxtaposition between the technology on site and the human beings operating it. At a time when the sector is gripped by a severe systemic skill shortage, logic dictates that the value of the individual worker should be at an all-time high. In any rational economic market, a scarcity of skilled labour grants those workers leverage, influence, and a voice. Instead, the demolition and construction workforce has never been quieter. The mechanism for this silencing is structural rather than technological. The widespread shift towards agency-based self-employed labour has transformed skilled artisans into disposable commodities. Operating on a precarious tightrope of short-term contracts, the modern site worker exists in a state of perpetual vulnerability. To raise a concern about safety, to question a target, or to suggest that working conditions are subpar is to risk a swift, unceremonious text message from an agency telling you not to bother showing up on a Monday. Even those fortunate enough to secure direct employment find themselves playing a game of survival, doing their utmost to not rock the boat. The historic safety nets have evaporated. There's no collective bargaining power to speak of, no centralised forum where grievances can be aired without fear of reprisal, and no broader representation. The workforce has been stripped of its collective weight and reduced to a collection of isolated individuals who now view themselves as entirely expendable. And this leads us to an uncomfortable question. In an industry that has grown so breathtakingly adept at silencing its equipment, is it really inconceivable that it's applied those same engineering principles to its people? Was the muting of the workforce merely an accidental byproduct of modern employment law, or was it a deliberate, strategic masterstroke? To understand how a workforce is silenced, you have to look at how a machine is baffled. You don't just stop the noise at the source. You trap it, absorb it, and isolate it. The corporate structure of modern construction does exactly that with human dissent. When a worker has a grievance, there's no longer a shop steward or a union representative to amplify it. Instead, the complaint is funneled through a labyrinth of digital HR portals, anonymous feedback apps, and third-party compliance agencies. Those systems aren't designed to resolve issues. They're designed to absorb them. They're the acoustic foam of corporate governance, ensuring that the sound of frustration never travels far enough to disturb the stakeholders or interrupt the flow of data. We've created an environment where compliance is synonymous with silence. The ideal worker is no longer just productive, they're acoustically neutral. They integrate seamlessly into the background, generating output without creating a single ripple on the corporate dashboard. The pinnacle of this engineering philosophy can be seen in the cab of the modern excavator. OEMs proudly boast about their state-of-the-art operator environments. They're marketed as ergonomic sanctuaries, climate-controlled, ergonomically sculpted, and sound-suppressed. When you sit inside one of these machines, the door seals with a premium, airtight thud. The chaotic reality of the site fades. You're completely isolated from the vibration of the tracks, the grind of the bucket, and the shouts of the ground staff. You're enclosed in a high-tech canoe, left alone with your touch screens, your Bluetooth radio, and your thoughts. The industry tells us that this cocoon was designed to keep the world out. Tells us it was engineered to protect the operator from the harsh, damaging frequencies of the engine and the site. It's framed as an act of corporate care, a triumph of occupational health. But as you look out through the tinted and toughened glass at the site, a darker truth emerges. What if we've misunderstood the engineering brief entirely? What if the cab of a modern machine was never actually designed to keep the sound of the site out? What if it was designed instead to keep the voice of the operator in? There you are. I was tempted to call that the sound of silence, but when I checked, I'd written about something before and called it the sound of silence. So that is called a deliberate silence. There you are. We've silenced our machines, and we've subsequently silenced our men and women as well. Any thoughts on that? Would love to hear from you. Jim says, it's perfect. I want to be left alone. It's when I dream up my best ideas. Yeah, listen, I am probably at my most creative in the car. You know, that's I don't have it in front of me now. I've got a little recording device that I use when I'm in the car. If I have an idea, I just blast it into that, and I absolutely agree. But I mean, there was a fair degree of artistic license at the end. I don't believe anyone has built a machine cab to keep the voice of the operator in, but we have become very, very good at controlling noise. And one of the noises that we've controlled, almost to the point of silence, is that of the operators and the operatives on site. And that's not a fluke. You know, when I was at Bobcat not so long ago, you know, one of the things that they've got a dedicated acoustic chamber where they run their machines to make sure that they meet all necessary and incoming noise restrictions. They've invested millions to do that. They've invested millions to take that noise level within the cab a decibel down or a decibel further down, just to make it more and more and more comfortable and less intrusive to neighbours. But all the while that's been going on, the wider industry has been taking the voice of the demolition and construction workers out. And I use the word absorb advisedly. You know, we have things like acoustic foam. There's a bit of it on the wall here. I know I've punched holes in it, so it probably doesn't do quite as much as it should, but there's acoustic foam there to dampen some of the sound, so I don't get very much echo in this room, and it dampens the sound. Within the corporate structure, we've got our own acoustic foam, and that is HR practices. That basically, you've got a complaint, we'll listen to your complaint, and it's absorbed, and like a black hole, it never emerges out the other side. It's just taken in, and that's it. That's the end of it. And going back to the point I was making about people that are self-employed, where do you go with a grievance? If you have a concern about safety on your site, if you have a concern about working practices, working conditions, if you spotted a colleague drunk or high or both, where do you take that? Because we all know how this industry works. You take that to your site supervisor and you'll probably get fairly short shrift. If you take it to the agency will then refer it back up the line, and you may well find yourself unemployed because you get the phone call back to say, we don't need you next week. Purely coincidental, obviously, you know, you couldn't tie the two together. But that's how the system works. And as a result, we have slowly but deliberately and strategically silenced people. And I do think this notion of isolation plays into it as well, because a lot of guys have been forced into self-employment. Back in the day, when everyone was directly employed, you know, if you had a gripe about your employer, and you were working for a major muck shifter or a major grounds work company, and you had a gripe, you'd tell your mates that you had a gripe, and then they would tell their mates on another site, and all of a sudden, rather than one person's voice in the wilderness, you had 100 people all saying the same thing. Yeah, the working conditions are crap. Our wages aren't as good as they could be. We're being asked to do things that are dangerous or unhealthy or whatever it might be. Now, at least in part because of this forced self-employment, every man is an island. And if you complain in complete isolation. And there's nobody to take up your fight for you. You are fighting alone. And let's face it, this is one of those David versus Goliath fights in which Goliath will always win, because Goliath is big, it's rich, it's powerful, it has legal teams working for it. So even if they've neglected you, put you in harm's way, even though everyone knew they were putting you in harm's way, you try proving it. Try proving it, and you will really, really struggle. So yeah, there you are. We've silenced our machines and we've silenced our men. Jim Turner says it's easy. If you aren't happy, refuse and go and work for someone else. There is a degree of that. But I think now, perhaps more than any time in recent history, we have a situation because of the cost of living. I think everybody, even if your job is deeply ungratifying, unsatisfying, deeply unpleasant, I think there is a tendency to cling on because of the perceived security. Better the devil you know. I'll stay here and I'll put up with the bullshit and the nonsense and the unpleasantness, because I don't want to find myself unemployed. I'm finding it hard enough to pay my bills as it is without losing a week or a month in unemployment while I search for something else. Whether all of this has been a deliberate ploy or whether it's just the way that things have evolved, because there's so many facets to this. The busting of the unions late 70s, early 80s by Margaret Thatcher. So we lost some of our representative power. The change in employment law, that's exacerbated it. The eagerness of major contractors to get people off their books so they can ride the waves of demand a little more easily. You combine all of those, it's been like the perfect storm. It really has. But regardless of whether that's been a deliberate objective or just a happy coincidence for the powers that be, they now have the workforce to a pretty big degree by the short and curlies. Yes, you will find the occasional Jim Turner who will just throw his teddy bear out the pram and bugger off and find himself something else to do. And Jim's not alone in that, and fair play to him. But there's plenty of others out there that don't have that luxury, that bravery. Let's face it. Every time you quit your job, even if you've got another job lined up, you are stepping into the unknown. Will your face fit? Will others accept you? Will you be up to the job? Will you be able to adapt to a new set of working rules and regulations and foibles of the employer, of your new employer? All of those are the unknown. Now, obviously, there are people out there that operate in this industry, Dan Cullen being one. You operate like a nomadic operator. You go from job to job to job, and part of your learning curve is learning to adapt, learning to accommodate other people, other working practices, and you do that as you go along. But not everybody has that degree of flexibility and that degree of, as I say, bravery. Bravery sounds like a bit of a strong word, but to take a step off the precipice and say, I've had enough here, I'm going to try somewhere else. I've changed jobs probably half a dozen times. The biggest one was when I went freelance. I'd done my time on various magazines and decided it was time to quit. And I was excited. I was really looking forward to it. But there was a bit in the back of my head, yeah, but what if it doesn't work out? What if it turns out that you're really good at being a follower, not particularly good at being a leader? All of that goes through your head. Dan Cullen says, have a fantastic weekend. Have a fantastic weekend, guys. Stay safe, stay happy, and be yourself. Jim Turner, I give a firm the chance to change. If they don't, I'll be off elsewhere. And I always work my notice. Gary Muirhead says, have to go. he says. Have to go, guys. Have a fantastic and relaxing weekend, people, and see you all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. Yeah, I think that's a perfect note to end upon, because that is almost an hour. We have decided that Kubota is the numero uno, the grand fromage, the big cheese, the big kahuna, big kahuna of the mini excavator world. We've put the world to rights on us being silenced as workers. Time to move on. Go and have a fantastic weekend. I'll see you on Monday. Look after yourselves. Stay hydrated. Stay cool if you can. See you soon. All the best.